So let me just begin by introducing the Khidki Collective to those of you who've joined us newly. The Khidki Collective is a group of scholars committed to building public dialogue on history, politics, and culture. We came together during the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, and we were brought together by interest in Deccan, but more broadly in regions and places. Our attempt has been to move beyond the academic community and speak to the larger public sphere, and this talk is one such endeavor that we are undertaking. We also attempted to, in this attempt to reach out to a larger public sphere, we've also published 2 sets of curated pieces which have been hosted by the News Minute and The Wire. We're hoping also to work through different languages of the Deccan as well. This particular series is, as you all know, called the Deccan Conversations, and where we're bringing together early career scholars who are working on the region. Our first talk began on the 15th of April with Dr. Hima Bindu, who discussed Telugu periodicals and linguistic networks in the princely state of Hyderabad. It was then followed by Pramod Mandade, who's a PhD scholar at the Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, who's studying the politics of memorialization around the integration of Hyderabad in 1948. Our previous talk was by Namrata Kanchan, who's again a PhD scholar at the University of Texas, Austin, and her talk was on forging early modern Dakkanese literary canons. All these talks, like I said, have been or will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and a short summary of each talk has also been or will be put up on our social media handles. So that's broadly what we've been doing here at the Khidki Collective. My name is Dr. Swati Shivanand, and I'm also a scholar working on the history of Deccan. This series has also been put together by Dr. Lamanya Krishna as well, who is the other curator for this talk. About this talk, first I'd like to introduce the moderator. The moderator is Dr. Dickens Leonard, who is an assistant professor at IIT Delhi. His areas of research are in literary studies, comparative literature, film and cultural studies, translation, and the history of anti-caste thought. His publications generally explore how anti-caste intellectuals have engaged with religion and literature in the context of colonialism and print in India, and the spatial dynamics of representation in contemporary Tamil cinema and culture. Dr. Leonard has also been with CSSC Kolkata and at the University of Hyderabad. Thank you, Dr. Leonard, for agreeing to moderate this talk and for being part of this series with Khidki Collective. Finally, our speaker for the day is Dr. Sasi Kiran. He teaches cultural studies and communication at Plain University in Pune, India. Prior to this, he had completed his PhD in communication from the University of Hyderabad. His PhD thesis was on the Vijnana Chandrika Mandali in early 20th century Telugu publishing house. His research is in the areas of media history and cultural studies. And over to you, Shashi, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this talk for us in the Deccan Conversations.
Thank you, Swati. And thank you, Khidki, for giving the opportunity to share some of my work. And also, thank you, Dr. Leonard, for agreeing to moderate this session. So I just have a PPT. I'll just share it in a second. Just give me. Are you able to see the PPT?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to divide the talk into 3 parts. So initially, I'll try to introduce the Telugu print culture landscape and also the Telugu modernity landscape in the early 20th century. And my time frame is limited to the first couple of decades of the early 20th century. And then I'll try to, in the second section, I'll try to theorize modernity and briefly talk about, because modernity is quite a it has quite a wide range of definitions, and it has a lot of literature around it. So I wanted to briefly lay out, what space of modernity that I am looking at. So that I'll do in the second section. And in the third section, I'll try to analyze an essay by Komarraju Venkat Lakshman Rao, who is the chief editor of the Mandali. I did a close reading of the essay. I'll try to present certain aspects of the analysis that are relevant to the modernity aspect that we are discussing here. And in the last section, I'll try to do a comparative analysis with the work of Ayathitas. So that is broadly the structure of the talk. So early 20th century was a period where there was a surge in Telugu publishing. It was happening from various centers. It was also happening in centers like Machilipatnam, and also the main center was Madras at that point in time. And some of it also was happening in Hyderabad. For instance, the Vignan Chandrika Mandali actually starts from Hyderabad, and then eventually they move on to Madras for various reasons. So that is the regional, because we are talking about Deccan, we need to have a sense of the geography of these publishing houses also. And Vignan Chandrika Mandali is also funded by the Raja of Munagala, Zamindar of Munagala Pargana, which also is broadly, coming closer to the Nizam's dominion. It was not part of the Nizam's dominion; it was on the border of the Nizam's dominion. And there was also a kind of, very, very small publishing industry where some of the publishing houses were trying out different things. For instance, some of them were trying out subscription models. Vignan Chandrika Mandali tried the subscription model, and they were working with patronage systems, the earlier feudalistic patronage systems, and also working with modern capitalist ways of doing business. So to just give a sense of what is it that the Mandali was publishing in, what exact genres. So they were publishing in sciences, they were publishing in history, they were publishing in historical novels, they were publishing biographies, and their big project was an encyclopedia project. So the sciences, they were not producing original pure sciences literature, but they were translating English science textbooks into Telugu. So that was their major work when it comes to the sciences. So I want to talk a bit about modernity. Just give me a moment. Yeah. So the Telugu public sphere of the time was experimenting with modernity through various institutions which were springing up at that point in time. We had the literary associations, we had publishing houses. There were also libraries. For example, the Mandali's founders were also involved in the library movement, which was instrumental in establishing libraries all over the Andhra region of Madras Presidency and also in the princely state of Hyderabad. 5 years before the Mandali was established, Komarraju Venkat Lakshman Rao was instrumental in establishing a library, the Krishnadevaraya Andhra Bhasha Nilayam in Hyderabad. While writing and publishing books, they were also involved in various capacities in both cultural and political spheres. For example, a lot of the Mandali members were also part of school textbook committees. They had the power to decide what could go into textbooks, what kind of language could go into textbooks, what could be the prescribed textbooks. And some of them are a part of later on the Andhra movement and also the nationalist movement. And there were also, while this was one major modernity project, the other project was also coming from individuals like Gurujada Venkatappa Rao. Gurujada was a close associate of the Maharaja of Vijayanagaram, Ananda Gajapati, and was involved in official capacity for quite some time as an epigraphist to the Maharaja. Now, Gurujada's modernity project was more literary in nature, and it was also an individual effort. He was expressing his ideas on modernity through poetry and prose. And if we kind of compare the modernity project of the Mandali with that of Gurujada, so Gurujada seems slightly more radical for that point in time. And again, if we limit our frame of reference to the Telugu Brahmin conceptualization of modernity, so then Gurujadas is more radical. For example, Gurujada was also working like Komarraju. Komarraju was the Diwan of Munagala Pargana, and he was also working under the patronage of Zamindars. So all their critique was limited to mostly literature, and they never really ventured into grassroots social reform. For instance, in one of Gurujada's works, which is titled Lavanaraju Kala, he addresses the issue of caste and untouchability. He observes that there are only two castes in this world, the good and the evil. If good is untouchable and these people are to be condemned, then I would join them and I will be one among them. And then goes on to say, it's not the vritti, the profession that should decide the caste of a person. It is the chitta, soul, that should decide his caste. So Gurujada, to a certain extent, was questioning the traditional theory of Varnashrama dharma. And now, if we kind of go a bit deeper into the other articulations of modernity that were coming in at that point in time, so we have the Adi Hindu articulations. Now, in terms of time frame, these are coming in at a slightly later point in time. For example, these are coming in the 1930s and the 1920s, 20 years later, after the establishment of the Mandali. And these are the Adi Hindu articulations. They were coming from Bhagya Reddy Verma and Kusuma Dharmana Kavi. And you had the Brahmin articulations of modernity that we already discussed with Komarraju and Gurujada. I'll go a bit deeper into the work of Komarraju a bit later, but I wanted to briefly touch upon what were the Adi Hindu articulations at that point in time. So, in an article titled Against Brahminical Tradition, a Dalit Critique of Indian Modernity, P. Kesav Kumar notes, while the medieval period witnessed the Shudra critique of caste in the form of Potluri Veerabrahmam and Vemana, the colonial, critique, it limits itself with the issues faced by Brahmins, mostly within the realm of social reform. And Gurujada, like I mentioned, he does respond to it. But again, Kesav Kumar notes that reformers such as Veerasilingam and Apparao were considered as the founders, or actually canonized as the founders of modern Telugu literature. They were confined to the problems of Brahmins only. While they sought to reform certain evils of the Hindu social system, they failed to grapple with the ideological and institutional framework of Brahminical Hinduism. And he also notes that there is a break in continuity when we compare, Gurujada, Veerasilingam, or Komarraju with earlier, Shudra, social reformers, even in the realm of literature like Vemana or Potluri Veerabrahmam, because Vemana and Potluri Veerabrahmam to a certain extent were following the aesthetics of the Bhakti movement, but that doesn't happen with the colonial, Brahmin reformers who are articulating modernity mostly within very, very limited spaces, and given their social background, intellectual and cultural tradition, they could not profess anti-feudal and anti-colonial caste ideology and consciousness, especially because they were directly employed by the zamindars. Unlike the saint poets, they did not revolt against all kinds of social evils. They were very selective in philosophical and ideological standpoints. In that sense, they failed to generate and build a popular cultural and ideological movement against the caste system. Though they did not claim modernity projects, authentic expressions of modernity in calls for egalitarianism were coming from the Adi Hindus. They have been analyzed in the work of Chinnaya Jangam. Though the main focus of my analysis is here more on the Brahmin articulation of modernity, I would like to paint a picture briefly of the Adi Hindus and their work here. Chinnaya Jangam notes that Kusuma Dharmana stands out as one of the first to challenge the brand of nationalism advocated by caste Hindus. In a rejoinder to a popular Brahmin nationalist, Garimala Satyanarayana, who preached Swaraja like most of the other, nationalist Congress leaders of the time, and wrote songs rejecting British rule such as Ma Koddu Ee Tella Dorotanamu, which translates as "We don't want the white landlord feudalism." It is translated as landlordism. It can also be translated as feudalism. Dharmana asked in response to this, what is Swaraja? And he wrote, Ma Koddu Ee Nalla Dorotanamu, we do not want this black landlordism. So this was the kind of modernity that was articulated by the Adi Hindus of the time, and we can notice a very strong difference in the way these articulations of modernity are happening. So to have a theoretical basis for this, I'll try to briefly touch upon some literature around modernity. So Stuart Hall suggests that one of the defining features of modernity is the decline of the religious worldview typical of traditional societies and the rise of a secular and materialist culture exhibiting those individualistic, rationalist, and instrumental impulses that are very familiar to us now. So that is one of the that is articulated as one of the fundamental features of modernity, the idea of a secular and materialist culture. And so my theorization is completely based on Aloysius' conception of modernity. So I'll briefly talk about that in this section. So in an essay on modernity, Aloysius observes that, I quote, the core substance of modernity is social rationality. It replaced what could be termed as the social irrationality of pre-modernity. The term social rationality has several advantages over the other forms of rationality offered, philosophical or instrumental or even simply rationality. The differences among men and women on account of their circumstances of birth being important, these differences were treated as the basis for social practice of discrimination, end quote. And in another work on modernity, there's a brief section, again by Aloysius, it's called The Essence of Modernity. So he observes that the core normative assertion of modernity is that all human beings are the same, and the sameness has to be the foundation on which socio-political organizations rest. Every other formulation, according to Aloysius, is peripheral. Now, building on this principle, he calls for the hitherto privileged groups to shed their extra power and merge with the groups considered inferior and relegated to the background and become a single public. And he also observes that the privileged are never going to easily give up their power. And the Telugu modernity projects led by the Brahmins of the time always tinkered with the peripherals of modernity. So they mounted scathing critiques on the existing devotional literature, like the Mandali does that in their inaugural editorial. They lament on the lack of historical consciousness, on the lack of scientific progress, on the lack of rationality within the Telugu public sphere, but they never engaged critically with caste. And the inaugural editorial of the Mandali extends the same argument to novels and laments the need for novels dealing with reality. There is also sharp sarcasm in the text about excessive mythological narratives in Telugu. Now, all of that is happening, but they never actually engage with caste directly in the way that Aloysius is, hinting at here. They were always engaging with the easier superficial aspects of modernity. One of their major engagement was with science. So we'll talk a bit more about science in the next section. So I'd like to focus on this particular essay, which is just give me a moment. I'll just switch on the light. I think I forgot to do that. Sorry. Yeah. So I'd like to do a close reading of the article published by the editor of the Mandali, Kumar Raju. So there is a history for this article also. It was initially published in Swadharma Prakashini, which is a different publishing house, in 1907. And then it is posthumously republished in the commemorative volume that comes out in 1923. After Kumar Raju's death, the same year it comes out. And there are a lot of essays that are selected for this volume. It comes under the section on historical essays. So this particular essay is about historicizing the subcastes and when these castes separated, and what is the nature of separation, and also trying to give specific dates and also recounting the history of the subcastes within the Andhra Brahmins, the Niyogis and the Vaidikis. So that is the subject of the essay, and it is mostly a historical essay because they're talking about For example, they talk about doing a historical investigation. So there is a lot of stress on hinting that this is a modern effort and they're trying to do a historical investigation, and it is all happening in a very, very scientific manner, which it does because he's referring to inscriptions and, and they're also referring to literature and trying to come up with dates and a few other, details about the Niyogis and the Vaidikis, the subcastes within the Brahmins. So now, a close reading of the essay reveals a lot of other things that are happening in the essay, because it is touted to be a historical essay. But once we skip the history part, so then we start seeing a lot of other layers in it. So, for example, this is one line. I'll just read it out in Telugu and try to translate it. Shrutyukta chaturvarnyamlo modatiది యగు బ్రాహ్మణ్యముకు బలమును తద్వారా గౌరతయు ధర్మాభిమానములను దేశాభిమానములను కలిగింతురుగాక. So this is coming in. I'll give a brief context to this. The essay laments that the Niyogis and Vaidikis should give up, their so-called, animosity. Apparently, there was an animosity between both of them, and they were not going together at that point in time. So Komarraju, in this essay, tries to say that, giving a lot of historical precedence, he says that both the Niyogis and Vaidikis belong to the same caste, and there is no need for any kind of animosity. And then he says towards the end that if we come together, so then what happens is it's going to give a lot of strength. Balamu is strength, and Gauravam is respect. And then he also very interestingly links it with patriotism, Deshabhimanam. And Shrutyukta basically means that by the authority given by the Vedas, or as said in the Vedas. So again, here very clearly they are upholding the Varnashrama Dharma within the while still talking about modernity. So again, going back to the Aloysius point of always tinkering with the peripherals of modernity and actually not getting to the essence of it. So here again, they are very clearly, Komarraju is very clearly talking about supremacy of the Brahmins. So that is what is the moot point here. And there's also a few other words that are used. There's also a phrase called Andhra Brahmana Prapanchamu that is used in the essay, Sakalandra Brahmana Prapanchamu. So they're talking about this, unified Brahmin imaginary. So that is what is coming out from this particular essay. And also the essay ends with the word, one of the words that is used in the last sentence is samskarana. So we can see the teleological limits of these modernity projects, though they're saying that, he suggests intermarriage between those castes. And though this is some kind of, interrogation into their own caste and all of that, but it's also a very, very rare opportunity for us to look into the Brahmin mind and how it was thinking about their own caste. So clearly there is a supremacist, tendency that is expressed very directly here. And also what happens with the most of literature or the sources that we have is it is very rare to find what Brahmins are thinking of themselves. We get to know a lot about what they're thinking of other, castes and communities, but never really, at least at that point in time. So this is that rare historical artifact which kind of gives an insight into that. So there's another aspect of it which I'll try to get to at the end of the paper, another aspect of the essay. So again, interestingly, they use the word scientific method and historical investigation and words that are again coming from the lexicon of modernity. Coming back to this, the book in which this essay is published. So the sectional divisions in the commemorative volume, they kind of give away the project of modernity that Komarraju and the Mandali set out to engage with. So the volume is divided into three sections: Charitrika, Bhasha, and Shastra, historical, linguistic, and sciences. The section on science has an essay on Karma Yoga and Panchangam, along with introductory essays on natural sciences and chemistry. So this is a recurring, because of lack of time, I'm not going into the other projects of Mandali. This is just a very small glimpse of what they were trying to do at that point in time. The section, so they always try to juxtapose Western modernity with a Brahminical modernity. For example, they'll have an essay on Karma Yoga next to an essay on natural sciences. They'll have an essay on Panchangam next to an essay on chemistry. And it also represents the order of knowledge that they were trying to bring into the vernacular. And the science section had to describe Panchangam, which indicates a certain anxiety to preserve traditional Brahminical forms of knowledge, and the ongoing nationalist search for an Indian science at the time. So that is also part of the project, because the Mandali's works were also, because Komaraju was inspired from Tilak, and the Mandali itself is inspired from the Swadeshi movement. So that aspect is also going on, which I discuss at length in my thesis. So, I just try to, yeah. So now I'd like to bring in Ayatithas. So there are a few reasons before I get into the work of Ayatithas and the comparative work that I'm trying to do here. I'd like to first talk about why is it or how is it important to how is it a reasonable comparison. So firstly, they are coming in the same year. Ayatithas starts publishing Tamilan in 1907. Mandali also starts in 1907. And in fact, even geographically, they are just a few kilometers apart, both the presses in Madras. The Vignachandrika Mandali is in Chintadripet, and the Gautam Press is in Royapeta in Chennai. So they're operating in the same region. They're operating very close to each other. And also the linguistic boundaries are not as demarcated as they are now, because in our imagination now, Tamil and Telugu are two very different registers and everything. But back then, they were very porous. So given all of these things, and also both of them were working within the larger, colonial modernity landscape. So that is also a very common thing between both of them. And the other major reason why it becomes a very important frame of reference is all the articulations that are happening in 1900s, especially in the first decade of early 20th century. The reference points for Telugu modernities are, for example, somebody like Gurujada or somebody like Kandukuri Veerasilingam Pantulu. Again, all of this is within the Brahminical fold. So we don't get to see something that is outside of the Brahminical fold, which is again where Ayatithas' conception becomes very valuable to look at. The articulations of Bhagyarati Varma, Kusuma Dharmana, Joshua, all of them are coming in later. So if you look at the time frame, it is not an anachronistic kind of a comparison. Because when I was discussing this with someone, they pointed out that why are you bringing in Tamil into Telugu and comparing both of them. I think this is my explanation, and I think later on we can kind of further discuss this as well. So now let's discuss what did modernity mean to Ayatithas. I'll first introduce Ayatithas. So Pandit Ayatithas was working from the Madras Presidency region, and Aloysius describes Ayatithas as a versatile genius and a confirmed rationalist, among other things. What I really found useful in my comparative analysis is this aspect of being a confirmed rationalist, because all the Telugu Brahmins who were there, they were definitely not, there's no confirmed aspect to their rationality. And also, they were always dilly-dallying on, the question of rationality. And the idea of social rationality that Aloysius comes up with, it's very close to what Thus' work is actually doing here. So I'd like to briefly talk about a particular essay that Thus comes up with in Tamilan. So it is titled as "Who is Human? What does it mean to be a human being?" Now, you can notice the stark contrast here between the kind of philosophical questions that somebody like Ayati Thus was trying to come up with, and the kind of questions that the Telugu Brahmins were trying to come up with. There's a significant difference in terms of what aspect of modernity were both these parties trying to engage with. For Ayati Thus, it was very, very clear. There were three qualities. These three qualities have to be there if somebody deserves to be called as a human. Santam, Anbu, and Igai. Peace, compassion, and generosity. Being caste-free was tantamount to practicing such values. And he also goes on to say that if we go by the actions of upper caste, they are subhuman, according to Thus, based on whatever was happening at that point in time. So again, I'm using Gajendran Ayaturai's work here, his thesis work, because I can't read Tamil, so I've just started learning it. So I've used Gajendran Ayaturai's work for this particular part of the analysis. So another very important aspect was the marked absence of women, non-Brahmin, or Dalit voices in the corpus of work that the Mandali produced, barring two books by C.R. Reddy, Kattamanchi Ramalinga Reddy, on political economy, who belongs to the landed Shudra oppressor caste that I also come from. On the other hand, Ayati Thus created a literary space through Tamilan that was more inclusive. For instance, Ayaturai mentions Swapneshwari Ambal, who was a contemporary of Thus and the editor of the Tamil magazine Madhu. And she was a regular contributor to Tamilan, who wrote on the issues of women's education and encouraged women to learn sciences and use their own judgment in society, in dealing with society. So that was the work of Ayati Thus. And also one major difference between the expressions of modernity that are coming from Telugu Brahmins and the expressions of modernity that is coming from Thus is the religious epistemologies that they're based on, while the Telugu Brahmins modernity is very strongly based on the Hindu epistemology. Ayati Thus conception is based on the Buddhist epistemology, which is much more egalitarian. So I'm coming to my the last section of my talk. So I've been closely researching modernities of the early 20th century for my PhD thesis and later work as well. If there is one thing that I'm completely sure of, it is that the Telugu Brahmins who were at the forefront of the modernity efforts were never truly involved in bringing about the social rationality or the egalitarianism that is the true essence of modernity. Their expressions of modernity were always working within the caste fold, and their epistemologies were always drawn from the Hindu religious frameworks. Articulations like those of Ayati Thus give us a contrasting framework as they chose to articulate their modernity outside of the dominant Hindu epistemologies. So I'd now like to come to this particular part of the essay. This particular part of the essay. I'll briefly talk about this. So here, to give you a context, Kumaraju is talking about the division of labor between the Vaidikis and the Niyogis. He's saying one subcaste was, taking care of the knowledge of the Vedas, and the other subcaste was involved in. It is not mentioned in this particular excerpt, but the essay talks about the administrative work that the Niyogis did by being Karanams and ministers to kings. So he's using the word division of labor here, and just so that he also makes sure that it is also written in English. It is in Telugu. It's called Shrama Vibhaga Nyayamu. So I'll like to dwell on this for a while. So one of the things that came up in our last discussion with Leonard, Dr. Leonard, Dr. Yamini, and Dr. Swati was about the relevance of analyzing the early 20th century modernity. How is such an analysis useful in today's time? What is the relevance of it? So if we look at how certain things never change, this is a classical example, the phrase division of labor. A full 116 years after Komaraju uses this phrase, and a full 90 years after Dr. Ambedkar explains in Annihilation of Caste how caste is not a division of labor but a division of laborers, I happened to find in Quora, the online platform, the same casteist argument that is part and parcel of caste apologia, that it is merely a division of labor. Now, as academics, we might sneer at the idea of mentioning Quora in a maybe a public talk, but I strongly believe that this is where the discourse is, far away from the academic bubbles in Quora, in Twitter, in Instagram. We see similar arguments in favor of caste, like that of Kumar Raju, where he's very specifically mentioning division of labor. And so there is a lot of this particular Quora question again was answered by a Brahmin from a mutt, and he created this entire. I didn't want to share it because it was too abusive. So he creates a table based on the division of labor based on modern professions, and so it is quite the thing, So in terms of how division of labor worked in the early 20th century to how division of labor works now. And so Mandli was also one of the first organizations in the presidency to translate science books into Telugu. Komaraju himself has written a few essays as introductions to these books, introducing the basic ideas in different branches of sciences. So I would like to juxtapose his ideas on caste with the efforts in science. And it leads me to make a reasonable guess based on the division of labor thesis, that while doing this modernity project, in his mind and in the mind of in the collective mind of the larger, Telugu Brahmin community, they were doing the rightful duty of the Brahmin to help create knowledge in Telugu. Again, coming back from Kumar Raju to again the present time in terms of understanding what is the relevance of modernity and understanding modernity from a social rationality perspective. So in a 2020 paper titled Brahmins as Scientists and Science as Brahmins Calling, Caste in an Indian Scientific Research Institute, Rennie Thomas does an ethnographic study in the Indian Institute of Science campus and uncovers similar prejudices when it comes to who is inclined or tends to have the capacity to pursue science with passion. The domination of Brahmin and upper caste scientists have given a Brahminical identity to science in India. And Thomas observes that they have been perceived to be the natural inheritance of scientific practice, an assertion reaffirmed by scientists and researchers in that particular ethnographic work. So again, the idea of the division of labor, it gets translated in very interesting and also very oppressive ways when it comes to the modern world, when it comes to 2020 now. And so I'd like to end with this particular paragraph. So this social of modernity is, at least I personally believe, is always the true indicator and not the science of modernity. Whenever we are thinking of modernity, whether this is a modernity project or not, or whether what kind of a modernity is this, I think the science and social aspects really help us. The oppressor castes in India warmed up very, very easily to the science part, but never to the social part. And it was always up to the oppressed caste to engage with the social of modernity, be it Aititas, Kusuma Dharmana Kavi, or Bhagyarati Varma. So, just I'm very grateful to the work of all the scholars in the references section here, because there's also a bit of, so my thesis work, I didn't engage for various reasons with a lot of the work that is here. And so now I'm kind of relooking at my PhD thesis, and there's a lot to work on. And I apologize if there were any mistakes in the talk, and it's still, I'm still trying to articulate this properly, and I'm welcoming any questions and feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sasi. That was a very lucid and engaging talk for me. I'd like to call upon Dr. Leonard to carry forward this discussion.
Thanks, Swati, and thanks, Sasi, for this very intervening discussion, which kind of, I mean, from the sense of it, I get a sense that there are, you have three overwhelming project at hand, developing from your PhD work on Vijnana Chandrika Mandali, right? From there, and then evaluating what increasingly scholars have called as, in one of a better term, a Brahmin modernity emergent in a regional public sphere. And I think this is also comes in a longer discussion within Indian social science, but also within discussions within post-colonialism, increasingly Dalit studies and so on and so forth, feminist studies as well, where there's a kind of discussion of whether is there a modernity, is there our modernities, and it's a longer history of discussions in which you're placing the project. One of the very interesting things that you brought to us is not only in continuing this discussion, but I thought actually foregrounding the Telugu corpus. And with the Telugu corpus, while you were offering as a critique, as you say in the last part of your work, where you want to see how, when there's a claim towards science, right, what is the social identity that actually claims science, which is separated from the idea of, in the sense that when they claim that there's something which is scientific, there is also at once a production of the social, where some groups kind of enclose themselves and distance from socializing the science, whereas there's the most upwards which actually go towards the other dimensions, the other dynamic of what this modern public sphere is open to. So there's a contemporary discussion, there's a historical project, right? It's a historical project you recover, but also there's a very interesting story that you have on how public sphere, right, emerged in the context of Deccan, which is the context of in Telugu, Deccan largely, but also how this public sphere, print albeit, has a certain very global dynamic. And this can be worked out with what is modernity, what is science, what is to be Telugu, what is to be Indian, right? What is to be part of a nation sphere, what is to be reading public sphere, and so on. So in that sense, the presentation was packed with three very interesting dynamics, which are actually interrelated. So let's make it conversational. I have three larger kind of intervention into your presentation, and I thought let's make it conversational. I have the first one is a large question, right? It's a large question I have, and I thought which is crucial for your work, and probably you can reflect on this, which is modernity, and particularly your corpus that you're looking at, which is the print archive, right, which started from 1900. Largely, you looked at this archive, which ran newspapers, which probably ran books, which probably also did other modes of, say, politicization or socialization in its context. It could be drama, it could be theater, it could be novels. It could the genre could be variant, could be many, right? So this is not a very singularly, not only Telugu, kind of a framework, but it is something which happened even in, say, where we often identify modernity to be a source of, which is Europe itself, right? So just imagine in the 16th century in Gutenberg, a circle emerged. Probably this was the thing that was, probably they thought, right, when we are printing books from, say, from palm text or leather, from codex, from codex to codex is the leather, write up from which the print, automatic writing happened, automatic typing happened. Something which was probably, we can't imagine the whole of the Protestant ethic without the whole industrialization of the print, kind of, the print history, if you want to just, make it short. So is there a similar kind of a story, right, for any reform to happen, a certain kind of a rupture? It could be a certain kind of modern industrialization at work. It could be a certain drastic governmental change. And in India, there was educational policies from, from 1999, from 1900s onwards. You have, acts which significantly changes how things are governed and so on. So you have a certain kind of a change in mode of how, as subjects, one relate with, one's own self, say for example. So if we apply that, and if we understand if we historicize the project, right, by 1906, is there a global story there in modernization itself? Like, it has to go with the similar lines in which, things happen. Otherwise, like take a pause. There are multiple ways in which groups engage with this, what do you say, in this exposure to what can be called as, a certain kind of a global venture, which is capital, which is modernity, which is print, which is a change towards ways in which, governance, or rule or regulations matter, including the world as we know it, right? Knowledge and so on and so forth. So one can take both ways, but I was thinking in the story, you were looking at how did Brahmins respond, and if there were, outcasts who were responding, or most are responding, how are they responding? And it seemed there are, these two, things, two locks you want to put in. So for example, I was thinking, the same print happened in Germany, right? Groups responded distinctly, right? So, the Jews responded differently, the Germans, so-called, respond differently, the Protestants respond differently, and so on and so forth, right? Even, as we go into details, we have also different parts of Europe responding, in the sense that there's no one European monarchy itself. And if they're telling multiple monarchies, there's no one European monarchy itself. So, if we place that larger question in the context, right? And since you want to see modernity as the major framework, how do we understand your, say for example, the responses to it, the responses to this global claim, right? The Vijnana Chandrika Mandali responding to this kind of a global phenomenon. That's the first thing I thought you can think about. Should I go on, or you want to let's make a conversation? Yeah,
I'll answer it first. I'll answer this first. Yeah. So in terms of global, there are global influences, definitely. So one big part of the Mandali's project is the encyclopedia work. They do publish 3 volumes, but again, after the death of Komarraju, it doesn't happen because he's the main person who's doing everything. So that project is inspired from the encyclopedia projects that are coming from Europe, the Britannica Encyclopedia, mostly that is where they're inspired from. And so that is one big influence that is there. And there are also some minor, hiccups that they face because of the World War. There is a paper problem and all of that. Because of that, they don't publish. So that is one part of it. And the other thing that is happening is all of these individuals are very well placed at that point in time in history. They're also well funded, generously funded, and Komarraju has a day job, which is again, that's why he's able to engage with all these things. The reason the publication moves to from Hyderabad, one of the reasons is that the Diva, as the Divan of Munagala, he was supposed to be in Madras to fight court cases that the Munagala Zamindar was facing. So again, they're kind of fighting these inheritance battles. So that is also happening. Like if you look at the political economy of it, all of that is happening at the back end, which kind of puts these people at the right place at the right time. So that is one aspect. They're getting in the funding. And there are also influences. For example, they do want to mimic Western historiography and Western historiographical practices. For example, Komarraju learns epigraphy and he wants to read inscriptions. So that is also kind of coming in from, I would say it is a Western influence. So that is, I think, by and large, in terms of how they're responding to the world, what happens after the death of Komarraju is they come up with world histories. So that happens later. That happens in 30s. So that's a different project altogether that is coming mainly from Ayadevara Kaleshwara, who is in Congress and who is in jail at that point in time, is imprisoned. And so he is coming up with, Telugu, French Viplava, basically. So the French Revolution, the history of French Revolution, the history of American Revolution, and then they also come up with a history of Turkey. So all of these things are happening later on. So from the 30s, the project changes completely from what it is in the first decade, and also after the death of Komarraju. This focus shifts to, by and large, they're reacting to how they want to produce literature that is going to help them in the nationalist cause. So that is what they do in the 30s. So that is the global story. In terms of groups and how they're responding, for example, what happens is one other project of the Mandali is the histories. So they do produce histories. Now, so they produce Andhra Charitra. So that is one of the early histories of Andhra region. But it is primarily caste histories of different groups. For example, the third volume is about the Reddy Rajula Charitra, the Reddy kings. The second volume is mostly about the Velamas, so who kind of ruled at that point in time. So basically, again, they are all caste histories. And so these groups, interestingly, like the volume on the Velamas is funded by the Velamas. Now, one of the historian who is writing it, he mentions an aspect where he says that the Velamas are of a mixed caste origin. So that angers the Zamindars, and then they stop funding that project. So then they go to the Reddys, and that entire book is about the Reddys history. So they're responding to it, very, very, I would say, they're being very practical and pragmatic about it. And each caste is trying to get its history published. And at the same point, interestingly, the Justice Party, the non-Brahmin movement, which doesn't have like a lot of effect like it did in Tamil Nadu in the regions of Andhra, but there was that aspect also. C.R. Reddy was part of that movement. But again, that was a very, very, it's almost like they wanted to replace the Brahmins, so that there is no egalitarian, aspect to the non-Brahmin movement here. So that was also happening, and they were having debates with Brahmins. For example, in Kollur, there is a public debate that happens where the landed Shudra castes, so they're debating with the Brahmins on their right to study scriptures. So they say we are also eligible to, we also want to study scriptures, basically. So they want to study Vedas and all of that. So that is also happening at that point in time.
It seems that from the present, from the engagement you're telling, there's a certain kind of of the Brahmins' claim towards entry into the print public sphere, and particularly into into the institutions that modernity and colonialism opened up. And when they enter, they seem to actually open it by enclosing. And by opening, why I mean is, this is a longer history, that even when, say print came in or any new kind of media came in, what happened in the beginning, it's as we all know, the form itself, or rather the phenomenon itself, did not create anything new. It kind of translated older stuff or translated from other. So it seems that is the pattern in which what do you say, the most privilege, rather, the Brahminical seem to actually enter into that mode, and then while entering by opening it, it also encloses. That seems to be a very interesting, interesting way in which you're putting it, in the way in which you understand, read the Mandali. My second question is interrelated, because I thought it will open up to a newer debate discussion, and this is of interest to me because you of course mentioned Adi Hindu attempts at a certain kind of a dialogue, if not a dialectic. It was a dialectic, and actually Jankam Chinaya actually calls it as a dialectic imagination. In this very important book, it's just in front of me. Please check it, because I think a couple of chapters, chapter 5 and chapter 6, particularly, of course, it comes in 19, he tracks it from 1915 only because of documentary history until it goes on to the Hari Hindu attempt goes on to a long time until Ambedkar's engagement. But I thought something is very interesting because even say, for example, the main figure, the like Ayodhitas who was earlier, was a similar kind of a figure who was into setting up associations, starting schools, running Bhargireddy Verma, who was called, I think, Madari Bagaya was my name, and he takes his name. And it's very interesting because almost similarly across the subcontinent, you have similar patterns. And I think Aloysius had captured it very nicely across the subcontinent. What were the most oppressed actually doing it as a certain kind of an emergence into modernity, emergence into a certain kind of arrival, if not modernity. And it seems very interesting because the journal he starts, the Bhagyanagar Patrika, right? And when they started a very interesting discussion, this is taken up by Chinaya Jangam. Why this name? Why does he have this name ready? Seems to be one of the major discussion, Golconda Patrika, right? So it's very, very interesting dimension because if anybody calls themselves Reddy, what will happen to the original? Yeah. So in Golconda Patrika, and there's a huge debate there, and it seems this guy Bhagireddy Verma also goes on to write similarly, like Ayodhidas. His last text was called Indra Desa Saritram, which is a kind of history of India through the Buddhist lens. He also attempts to write a certain kind of historical narrative, imagineer. I forget the title now. It must be somewhere. And two books he writes. One is a counter view of the pre-Aryan kind of a genealogy, which he claims. It should be somewhere. I forget the name, but almost similar. And the second book, which actually gives a certain kind of a lineage, a certain kind of what I call as a certain kind of a pre-caste lineage, that they are not just Malas and Madigas. It's and it's in the Adi is quantified. As it's not just an imaginary, it's a quantified history in time. So it seems a counter imaginary, but at the same time, it's a very dialectic. It is an opposition to something. It negates a prior negation, right, of a kind. And you see a similar pattern in later Ambedkar's historical works. Who were the Shudras, who were the untouchables, civilization, revolution, counter-revolution. All this, it's a kind of a very interpretative affair that happens there. From his earlier works, which is Annihilation of Caste, social scientific language would be there. It seems a certain sense of critique of caste as a certain method of using, what do you say, the media which is at present. Say, for example, what is the media at present? How a caste critique happens in social media is very distinct from how caste gets affirmed, consolidated, or even organized in the same media. So like the same space, right? How two people use a certain mode of critique, the mode to, a form to critique. Because I think it's a similar pattern, a similar framework happens with, the Adi Hindu, experiment vessel. So I want to, why I raise this question and raise this context is, of course, this information many of you would know, but I was thinking, how do you want to take this question for the question on debates on modernity, right? Say, for example, do you want to treat it as contesting a narrative of modernity, or do you want to treat it as a certain kind of an opening up of not necessarily socialization or politicization, but also certain way of demanding an ethic of modernization? There's an ethic of modernization that is a demand, right? So and this ethic can go back to, taking back something from history, or this ethic can be very contemporary, like give me some education, right? Not something, right, which you are not allowed to do, but something very much here and the now. So it seems it works simultaneously at this level, from the larger thing. So how do you want to take this? Or do you want to confirm this? You want to have a different point of view?
I think the second part, like in terms of the entire the new perspective or something that I found very much lacking in my thesis. So when I started reading what Ayatithas wrote about, the fundamental question he's asking is a very ethical question, and he's talking about who is human, what makes one human. So that seems to be a more useful way of engaging with modernity in terms of looking at what are the ethics of modernity. Like, for example, what were the ethics of, let's say, somebody like Kandukuri Veerasilingam Pantulu, who was again working on widow remarriage and all of these things within the Brahmin community. And what were the ethics of Komaraj Venkat Lakshman Rao? What were they actually doing? For example, was it just limited to literature, or was something else happening? Even in literature, what is the ethic that one is approaching it with? So this particular essay that I tried to analyze. So this essay. I think.
Can someone's
I think that's okay. Yeah. So this particular essay actually brought out what are the ethics of the Mandali and the person who was leading it, because it was very difficult for me to figure it out very clearly with the other texts, because the other texts are all very sanitized in the sense that they're talking about scientific methodology, they're talking about some kind of philosophy, they're talking about how history has to be done now that we have all these newer ways of doing history. So they're talking about all these things. They're talking about how to organize knowledge with their entire encyclopedia project. So, but all of that never had any hint of the ethics of their modernity. So I don't know, like I have to start maybe, reading more literature on the ethics side of modernity, even outside of India. How does that operate? Because most of the discussion here is around, science and also they don't venture too much into this.
Just to add on, just to ethics along with it, that's also an aesthetics of modernity.
Yeah.
I think language and what gets which form. For example, prose becomes a major form, right? So
Yeah.
I think those dimensions will open up very interesting questions for us to the kinds of things that you are thinking and working through. The last one, but also I think I also felt the Ayodhya story as a critique of this was a little forced, but also outside. So, but also I was thinking along, say, for example, the Das's context, and this comes from my own research and my own reading, is primarily one of the highlights of Das's life of thought is it's of course he's discovering it's a humanism at work, but something which is resourced in what many interesting scholars have called it as resourced within a certain kind of a living memory, which is a living archive kind of a thing, which could be language itself. And for him, in language, he's discovering a certain kind of a tradition which was there, if you want to tell. And of course, he's reinterpreting in this moment, Buddhism, the Tamil Buddhism, the Sangam archive, completely rereading the archive within the, as having a certain kinds of a casteless existence, but also a certain way of the world to actually be, to belong to. This is Tasar's own, Tamil cosmopolis, right? So I was thinking, what does religion do, right, in Mandali, right? Because the Adi Hindu movement, the title Adi Hindu itself is a certain kind of it's engaging with a category of religion, which is also constituted as part of a modernity project. And today, religion is, we can say we are all postmodern, we are all working through technology, but in everybody's cell in which a subject is formed, religion, this is in Europe, this is in America, these are like spaces which are contesting and including our own surrounding. Religion seems to be a category that is transfixed and worked along with modernity quite well. In fact, one can even say people have kind of invented modernity and religion or creative, right? So I was wondering, and this is something very interesting, because if the Adi Hindu movement largely worked from Hyderabad, and they ran the whole thing in Telugu when the major population of official archive was largely in Urdu, and people were running newspapers, and they sustained it there, although they had the Andhra variant, they were popular there and here. So, and of course, there's a huge archive who did not, and increasing, there's a lot of work. I think Chandu, I saw Chandu's name, two Chandus here, like who's working on the archive of caste, Dalits, Christianity, missionary, and what is, missionary songs. You see a very interesting, if not a kind of a, reformulation of a religion which doesn't dissociate, right, from civic forms of life, right? So science is, say, for example, this is reason, this is how, these are things wrong, they should be negative. It's one way of civic living for our present, but at the same time, it seems for the most marginalized, they are not dissociating the bodily or the embodied notions of what is to exist, which can be wisdom, which can be, how do we understand them as emotive subjects? How do we understand, in a sense, that reason or what is scientific thinking or scientific existence doesn't seem to separate itself from other modes of dwelling, right? And they might, in this particular point in time, they might rediscover, reformulate what is Adi Hinduness. They might engage with what is Christianity. They might reformulate themselves as a new form of commune. This could be, not be just a political commune. This could be a very lived, experiential commune. This could be in the church. This could be in organizations that, I think I got the book called, it's called Purana Charitramu, but he also runs it via the Adi Hindu Press. And very interestingly, they run a self-respect, group also. This is Bhagirathi Verma and others, right? And of course, Bhagirathi Verma is also seen critically in Jamgam's work, because it's a particular time period, and he also works along with the Congress, Gandhians, and so on and so forth. But I thought this organizational dimension, right, it's not dissociated from the most of the Dalit critique, if you want to say. It's not dissociated from a certain kind of a dwelling which separates their body from the mind, whereas the science only group remains as, or rather, what in the way in which it reinterprets what is science in print, seems to dissociate, enclose itself off from other modes of dwelling, which is then calling for a specific kind of negation, right? You need to negate all these things and then become. So, in a sense, I thought, what does then, right, the role of religion do to the project of modernity that you interpret in this archive? And if you want to see a cohabit, a kind of a cohabitation or co-appearance, that's a better term, coming together of mind body, kind of a existence, where do you find them? Like if this archive is lacking, right, it while it talks about science, it doesn't talks about, the other person who's sitting next to you who could be cleaning a toilet, right? So where does this archive exist, right? That's something you can, and do you find these debates apparent even in an archive like Mandali's newspapers? Yeah, that's a last question.
Yeah. So the Mandali's thing is very closely entwined with religion. So which is kind of, very obvious also, because that project is that also the other side of the, for example, in the encyclopedia project, they try to bring back the Vedic geography. So they juxtapose the modern geography with Vedic geography. For instance, they have entries on Vedic cities, Aryavata and all of that. And immediately the next entry would be on a city that is existing now. And in the same entry, they talk about modern geographical boundaries. And in the same entry, they're also talking about the Sthala Purana of that particular place. So it is very clearly entwined with religion. And if we get to their history projects, they are quite communal. For example, they have historical novels, and Gurujada himself critiques it very, very caustically, that these projects are, not they're quite ahistorical, firstly, and also, and he also looks at the entire Mandalis project as a very crass patriotic. He calls it a patriotic commercial enterprise. So that is his Gurujada's reading of the entire Mandalis Center, which is also partly true in terms of what they were trying to do. So that way, it is a big part of that. And also, when they're talking about the mind-body thing, for example, in this particular essay that I was trying to analyze, Komaraju does talk about the rituals that involve the body of the the Vaidiki Brahmins, and he gets into that particular zone where he's talking about why do Vaidikis think they are above Niyogis, for example, within the subcastes. So there he brings in the body and he talks about certain rituals that the Vaidikis perform and the Niyogis don't. And he questions, is it because of that you think we are, because he is a Niyogi, that we are inferior? So he's talking about that within the, so within his subcaste and caste grouping. But religion is a big aspect of what they're trying to do. And also coming back to the reason why I was again looking at Thus as a figure to kind of compare this project with, was I was looking for epistemologies that are outside of the Hindu fold. And so this is the only one that is kind of comes at around that period. And also the market difference which one can see then, because ultimately the teleology of Mandali is basically that they want to promote a very Hindu nationalist upper caste Brahminical perspective. So that is their project. The egalitarian thing is not there anywhere remotely in the Hindu epistemology, like if you can call it that. So then if I have to compare the social aspect, so that is where I thought it kind of works well. But yeah, I think it needs more depth to it, to kind of make that comparison.
Thanks, Sasi, for engaging and responding to the thing. I'm sure there are a lot of other participants want to ask. Just to add on, there's some work that's happening. I think on at least Christianity, I'm aware, Chandu,
yes.
Chandu's work, but also this other historian called Chandrabanu, who has worked on how the communists have taken up this, and the very interesting kind of dialogue that happens with, say, Dalits working in this, and how they take print and so on and so forth. And of course, the important work was Chinmaya Chandram's and historically.
I was able to locate the book, so yeah, so it was very helpful.
Oh, good, great.
Yeah.
So I mean, largely, I think this completely collapses the kind of work that you're doing. Kind of collapses one of the earliest works, A.K. Ramanujan's. Is there an Indian way of thinking? If you read that piece, used to be taught. So where he particularly argues about context specific. Indian tradition is context specific, whereas modernity makes it context free. So it seems to collapse this huge thing, and A.K. Ramanujan's claim was just all context specific things will move to context free because of a global modernity. And it's a very interesting piece, and it seems that collapses this whole dichotomy and this kind of a trajectory that comes. So I think Chandrasekhar is around. Yes, he want to ask a question. So over to Chandu. Yeah, Chandu. Yes. Can you switch on your?
Yeah, Sashi, this is wonderful talk, and but I feel that there is this absence of, I don't know, you might have done it in your research, but due to lack of time, you are not mentioning here. Contribution of, as Lenny was telling, Christian press. So you're talking about Telugu press and Telugu modernity, first, 20th century. So there is a modernity articulated by missionaries, articulated by Dalits, again Dalits who were Christians, Dalits who were not Christians. See, there were various, there were modernities articulated by various communities, various people, right? So if you see in that case, if you see the contribution of Christian press, periodicals, journals, newspaper by Christian missionaries, but not in English, in Telugu I'm talking, vernacular Telugu periodicals, in a way which help Brahmins, to start this articulating modernity through print. By starting various their journals. If you see the archive of Telugu press, Telugu print in Madras Presidency, you will come across number of journals started by, published and edited by Brahmins in Andhra, much before of what you are mentioning in our talk, right? That's one thing. You're mentioning Bhakti sect, Vayamana, all those people, 5 important people, they are the mediate, they are the link now. So that is one thing. And second thing is, you're moving to Ayodhya Das. I mean, that's fine. It's excellent. But there are also people, these particularly nowadays I'm coming across, from Dalit community, educated Dalits who are articulating egalitarianism against the existing Brahminical caste. You can look at them. If you read, that's what. If you go back to Christian press or Telugu press print in the Madras Presidency, there are various arguments by Dalit leaders, Dalit people in Andhra Patrika, Andhra Kesari, Hindu Sundari, Bruhalakshmi. Not exclusively, there is space for these people, but here and there, now and then, these people took that opportunity to write and attack or counter attack the Brahmin modernity or caste supremacy of Brahmins, particularly Telugu women journals, Christian women journals. Most of the contributors were from Dalit community, Dalit converts. So, yeah, is there any reason that you missed them, or I just wanted to ask that?
So it is just, I just started looking at the thesis, and I have not gone through the archive as thoroughly as I should have gone through it. So I thank you so much, Dr. Chandrasekhar. I'll definitely, maybe connect with you and also seek help in terms of locating and going through them. So it is just, there's no other reason. It's just that I was not as thorough as I should have been. Yeah.
But Chandu's recent work came up in South Asia research, and when he has compiled these women journals from the Christian press, and it's very interesting to actually see it as a kind of a pattern, and he's pushing the time period backward. That's very interesting. So from that,
now I'm working on it. Actually, I'm working on Telugu Christian print. This month I've been working actually. I wanted to see and compile this archive of Telugu Christian periodicals, journals. So I've come across many new things, many new ways of these archives and all. So there you can see a lot of articles by Dalits attacking supremacy of Brahmins in the form of religion. Again, they took the medium as a religion. Some people took the religion, some people took directly attacking while discussing social aspects. So yeah, Christian press will be very helpful for you.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Are there any more questions to Sasi? Probably one. Yeah. Okay.
I think we can. Thank you both for this amazing talk and this conversation that followed that. Leonard, the discussion that you initiated was just took this to another level altogether. So thank you so much for that, for those interventions. And thank you, Shashi, again for sharing this work with you. And we hope that this has been useful to you as well. And of course, it's definitely we're thinking of how we can think of all these things while we're developing Khidki Collective also. So thank you, both of you, for your time. And we are going to be back on June 10th with another talk, and we'll announce this on our various social media handles. So please do join us again on June 10th at 6:30.
Thank you,
Thanks a
Khidki
lot.
Collective. Thank you, Sasi.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so
everyone
much.
for the
Thank
time.
you.
Yeah,
Bye.
it's nice
Thanks. Bye.
participating.